range of possibilities when we talk about design thinking. The first thing that people think when they think design is, you know, a phone or some kind of artisan work or textile. Engineers have a particular interpretation of design. So there are a range of different definitions. And all of those are related to what we're talking about this week. But here we're talking about design as a systematic process of developing a nation with humans in mind. So we are not talking about a particular product or service of itself, talking about a process that is systematic, that is human-centered, that allows us to develop innovations which are viable, feasible, and desirable. So, so some of the things that we focus on this week, and I said when we were meeting before in the Innovation Lab, there are 3 things I want us to do this week to be able to begin this conversation. And it's the beginning of a conversation. I want us to think about sort of theory and methods ideas, yes. I want us to think about the practical application as a case study, and I will give you the details of that. I asked you to read and look at some things. I have some more resources which you should also access, and I have all of them in a Canvas platform site, and if I have your details, you can sign up and get all of the information there. And the other thing is working on a particular problem this week, which has to do with how do we promote healthier lifestyles. Okay? So 3 things that we want to look at this week. And in this lecture, in particular, the question is how do we define design thinking? How does it relate to social impact and innovation? Because that is also a key element of this course. It's not just technical, it's very much social and human. What are some good examples of its application? Is there any critique? If you go and Google design thinking, you will find that there are people, in particular in the business community, who say design thinking is over, it was interesting, but now we have moved on. And there are other people who say, no, this is new, this is exciting, this is delivering results. So there is critique, but I think that critique, so the people who are unhappy, they're particularly from the business community, and they have a relatively superficial understanding of how this works. So what I want to do this week as well, and this is my way of organizing this, is to try to give you 1 semester, it's a 12-week in Australia course, content, and focus in these 6 days, which means we have to skip some things, but we cover those 4 ideas there. Apply the design thinking approach to a social innovation problem, that's to do with health. Develop expertise in framing and investigating problems using this approach. Now, I teach this course at IITM, Centre for Social Innovation and Entrepreneurship. And it's a process that allows you to frame and investigate problems in a particular way. So it's more than just being creative, being systematic, but not in a standard engineering approach or even science approach. We want to critically review the ideas and theories related to this and communicate project work. Now, my students all have to work on a project back in Australia. I'm going to ask you to do the same so that on Thursday of next week when we finish, you will present as a team of 3 or 4, a project about an enterprise idea about promoting healthy lifestyles. We'll be we're working through that process. So we'll talk about that in more detail tomorrow. But begin thinking about it, and begin thinking about how you can find information about that. So one definition from somebody who should know, Tim Brown, who is the CEO of IDEO, which is a global agency. And IDEO works very closely with the Stanford D School, and David Kelly, who leads that work. And Swinburne has a joint program with Stanford University mechanical engineering subject, which is design thinking. So we collaborate on this. And Tim Brown's definition, or his initial definition, from his Harvard Business Review article in 2009 is, he says, put simply, it's a discipline that uses the designer's sensibility and methods to match people's needs with what is technologically feasible and what a viable business strategy can convert into customer value and market opportunity. We will see later in this lecture that Tim has actually moved on from talking about just customer value. Now he's talking about social impact. This is him talking in 2009. In 2012-13, there's already a shift in his mind towards what the goal is. And he talks about, in that article, he talks actually about Edison and the way in which Edison, the inventor, didn't only think about inventing light, but in inventing a system within which that light could work, thinking about the city. And so it's important that the things that we innovate are not standalone products or services. They are elements in a system for people that achieve some end, which we hope is more beneficial than damaging. So, designer sensibility and methods. I just highlight the fact that, as I said to you, I have no design background, but I'm the go-to guy for design, or have been at least for a number of large projects with architects and engineers. That means that you, even if you're not a designer or don't think of yourself as a designer or a design thinker, can become one. So you train, you learn, and you can learn about this sensibility, which really means being able to see things in a certain way. So that's one definition. We'll look at some, some others as we go along. Now we're going to work this week also with the concept. When you go and look for any description of the process of design thinking, typically you will meet three versions, I should say. The version that we're going to use, which is a kind of older one, and one that still works for me, is what Tim Brown calls the three spaces of innovation. Notice when he says space, he doesn't say stage or phase. Space is relatively open. Space is a much more flexible thing than a phase in a linear sequence. So the idea of spaces of innovation, there are three of them: the inspiration phase, the ideation phase, and the implementation phase. This is a process of innovation, a process of discovery, a process of problem solving and experimenting and prototyping and testing and failing and learning and improving and it goes through these spaces. Sometimes, in fact, we might reach the ideation phase, which essentially is visualization. Say ideation, you think of ideas. Ideation is the visual representation of ideas. Inspiration is the taking from the environment inspiration from people, from objects, from as a research team, understanding that environment, and then implementation. Is obviously the turning of a prototype and a test into something workable. So, as I said at the beginning, we're working with 3 spaces. If you go and Google design thinking, you will find models that talk about 4 phases. And Jean Liedtke, for example, from Virginia Tech Business School, talks about 4 stages. And then if you go to Stanford D School, they have 5 stages. In fact, although they appear different, the names are different, they actually don't conceptually really represent different elements. So we're working with, as I say, with a 3-phase model. If I can draw your attention, did I send you? Did I ask you to read this particular article, the HBR? No. Yes. It's not. Okay. Well, you have to read it because it's kind of a basic text. If you don't have it already, we'll make another list. But you should read it. You need to understand it. It's the classic paper, initial paper. What I draw your attention to here, although you can't see it, detailed, but you can in the article. That you see the space, the notion of space here. Sorry, I moved to that. You see that notion of space here is it's quite a large area in which many things happen and which connect and interconnect, and then they move on. So this idea of spaces of innovation. This weekend, and in fact tonight, you're going to have to start thinking about this problem and begin asking some questions. I'll leave you with a guide, and when we come back tomorrow, you can begin to tell me what you've thought about this idea of promoting healthy lifestyles. How do we address that? What do people think? So now, the relevance of this approach is, let's see if I can just work. Yeah. Yes. Okay. So everybody, I'm sure, is familiar with Grameen Bank and Grameen, the foundation, and how it's kind of based on that, the foundation of microfinance. The idea now, so Grameen is fundamentally uses human-centered design thinking process. They talk about it, or they illustrate it in a very nice clip here to give you a sense. Notice also in this particular representation, they have their own terminology, a little bit different to what we talked about, but listen and you'll see. This is one particular example.
Since 1997, the Grameen Foundation has been helping the world's poorest become financially self-sufficient. At the core of our innovation process is the practice of human-centered design.
Oh, you mean so put the
A set of methods and guiding principles that help organizations discover and address the needs of their end users. While most organizations are really good at looking at their business goals, assessing their technological capabilities, and and coming up with products at the intersection of the two, when they release their products to the market, they are surprised to find that nobody wants to use them. They have failed to consider the needs of their end users. As many as 95% of new products fail every year. To maximize the impact that every dollar has on the lives of the poor, we need to make sure that the solutions we create work. There are 4 key characteristics of human-centered design. 1, it's grounded in knowledge about users. Before we suggest solutions, we go out into the field to understand user needs, goals, and attitudes. 2, it's collaborative. Addressing poverty is complex. Such problems require broad and deep expertise and cannot be solved by one person or organization. Our teams are interdisciplinary and work closely with clients, users, and subject matter experts. 3, it's visual. Humans are visual thinkers. 30% of our brain is devoted to it, as opposed to just 3% for hearing. Visualizing helps us to understand problems, communicate complex ideas, and identify new opportunities. 4, it's iterative. Prototyping ideas early and often and testing them in the field ensures our concepts meet the needs of the poor before spending time and money on creating high-fidelity designs. At Grameen Foundation, we have combined human-centered design with scalable business practices into 7 phases to take the project from kickoff to scale. A project typically starts with a planning phase to set goals and deadlines. This is followed by research and synthesis. Actionable insights from this phase are used to inform concept development. Concepts are selected, tested with end users, and refined. Product pilots planned and launched to demonstrate commercial viability. Data is collected and used to roll out the product on a larger scale. This solution and innovation process ensures that we create products that are both scalable and sustainable. To learn more, visit greenfoundation.org.
Okay, so human-centered design's fundamentals at Grameen's operation. You can see the way that
Human factors research plus design, presence, human-centered.
So you can see the way that they conceive of that, and some of the properties that it has, and that's in a particular context. So those features are all key features of the application of design thinking. This other term, human-centered design, is effectively a synonym for design thinking. That is the one that IDEO used to use until recently. I won't play you this clip, but you'll have a copy of the presentation. But this also gives you another vision, interpretation, version of what design thinking is. Puts it in a particular context. See, I might just play a little bit of that.
Suppose you are a part of a thriving business and you need to branch out and find that next big thing. Or say you want to change behavior, like getting people, a lot of people, to use less energy in their homes. How would you go about it? Design thinking is a powerful tool to tackle the unknown. It's a means of going on an expedition without a map, without even knowing the destination, but with the confidence that you'll end up somewhere great. Let's make it tangible with an example that captures the 5 key elements of design thinking. Day-1 was given the challenge of getting kids in America to move more, to help fight childhood obesity. The project started with an idea. Provide kids with a digital music player that has a motion sensor, then give them rewards based on their activity. But the big question was, would kids really use it? What could make the experience so compelling that they would use it long enough to see the health benefits? Learn from people. We began by talking with kids. We spent time in their homes and schools across the country. We listened to them share their motivations, habits, delights, and frustrations. The research included kids in the mainstream, but also incredibly active kids and the very sedentary. It turns out that those at the extremes are really good at giving a voice to problems that those in the middle might feel, but have a harder time putting their finger on. Find patterns. We captured our observations on hundreds of Post-it notes and laid them all out to make sense of what we learned. Using informed intuition, we looked for patterns that pointed to opportunities. Daniel said, "I get bored with solo video games. It's the multiplayer ones that keep me coming back." Meg said, "I don't listen to music while I'm running because I want to talk to people." Define design principles. These quotes, along with others, reveal one of the design principles that would help us get to a successful concept. Facilitate social interaction at all times. Many such design principles emerged. Together, they formed the guideposts of an experience that we felt confident would resonate with kids. Make tangible. We asked ourselves, how might we questions, to bridge the gap from design principles to specific ideas, and then quickly turn the best of them into rough prototypes. Iterating relentlessly. Building physical devices out of simple cardboard and mocking up digital experiences with paper and pencil allowed us to learn quickly. With each prototype, we tweaked and evolved the concept. We brought digital and physical models to kids to listen and learn. The concept evolved until we got to a compelling solution. What we ended up with was a new product category. Before Fitbit and Apple Watch, we developed an activity tracker that gave kids a portal to an online world where they could share and celebrate their real-world accomplishments with each other and their families. In a 6-month clinical trial, the impact was a 59% increase in physical activity. Learn from people. Find patterns. Define design principles. Make tangible. Iterate relentlessly. Whatever the challenge, design thinking is a powerful tool to reveal new ways of thinking and doing. What in your world could benefit from design thinking?
Okay, so a good example of got in quite a lot of great principles there in that particular example. Did you notice that in that story, they began with a solution? They actually began with it. They had something, they thought this will do it. They put it out there, and people went, the kids in this case, it didn't resonate. So it was quite interesting that it kind of started with a failure. And they went out, spent time, did their homework, talked to the kids, created prototypes, tested those, modified, changed them, and they built what they built based on ongoing assessment and interaction. Not because they had a good idea. One of the worst things you can do is build something because you think it's a good thing. Everybody thinks their idea is great. Until you put it out there, you're just talking to yourself and maybe your mother. So that's really important here, is that you have a problem, you come up with a potential solution, and you put out versions of this, very cheap, simplified versions of this, and you watch and see what do people say. What are they saying to you? Works, doesn't work. If it's an interface, for example, no, the navigation is not good. No, I don't understand that. The other thing, the worst thing you can do when you're doing testing is talking. You give somebody something that you've built, you say, play with this. And then you don't stand next to them and tell them how it works. That's not testing. So you've got to hand it over and see what people do with it. Then you will learn, does this work? We'll talk about that as well. But so you've seen, so we've got people like Tim Brown defining it for us in IDEO. You've got Grameen Bank and very much in the social sector, and Grameen Foundation thinking that human-centered design is the way they do business. You've got a lot of startup social innovations, particularly in the US, particularly in California, but not only, and elsewhere, using this process as we described here, including for fighting. Ultimately, the problem there is childhood obesity, not making some iPod. It's not the problem. The problem isn't how do we make something. The problem is childhood obesity. How do we get kids to move? That's what we're designing for. Now, one of the, I was thinking about the introduction from, from people from engineering here, and we're talking interdisciplinary, and I would say I work for a number of different research centers. In none of them am I a sort of a materials or design expert. And I work for the Center for Urban Transitions. I work for the Collaborative Research Center for Low Carbon Living. I work for the, when I say work, I'm a researcher for, and I was also a researcher on a large scale project on EV bus transport system for Malaysia. So in all of those, there are engineers, there are architects, there are scientists, if you like, in the room. But all of them have to do with some human problem. They all address either a development or a sustainability, typically, or some similar problem. And they have a human dimension. My job, when I sit in the room with the architects and the engineers, is to try and remind them that we have people, it's about people. So how do we go about this? So my role is that of bringing that dimension. The reason why design, and this includes in engineering, there is a call in the US by a number of leading engineers. Here I'm talking mech-eng and civil engineering in particular, for more design in engineering schools, because engineers have forgotten about the people they're designing for. This is in the US. So there is, and Stanford D School is a great example. They take it seriously. MIT does as well, Boston. So more design, more humanity, more social focus in engineering schools is a big issue in the leading engineering schools. The reason for that is that in fact, design, at least the way we're talking about design is a great complement to science. So when you think about science, or even think about engineering based on science, but with all of that applied perspective, it's great at dealing with the numbers, at putting and testing things, and at evaluating and coming up with solid solutions, and those things are important at lots of stages of the innovation process. Design also, design which doesn't do numbers in the same way that engineering does. Design, however, does understand the ways in which human emotions and aesthetics make something desirable. The best designers understand how to put it. You think even of somebody like not Microsoft. Microsoft's designs have been, although recently it's changed. But I'm thinking iOS, and I can't remember the company. Wait, it's not Samsung. Anyway, so the design element, the desirability, the aesthetics, when that combines with science, then you have a powerful combination. You have a much more powerful combination when you have numbers and rigor and system combined with desirability and aesthetics. Then you have a robust solution that appeals and works. It's important. Things got to work. But I always say, for an engineer, my brother's an engineer in the US. Now, for an engineer, it could be in a box, in an ordinary box with no aesthetics. And as long as it works, that's fine. That's the job done. Design says, yes, but it's not going to survive in the market. It's not going to last unless the desirability is there. So it's got to have that combination. So we talk about design thinking as combining science and design. And this is from Clive Owen. Clive Owen wrote this, and he's at Illinois Institute of Technology, Chicago, which is probably one of the best design schools in the US. He talks about this combination. What you can do tonight, and I suggest that you do, or even in the next few minutes, go and have a look at designkit.org. There's the link down there below. The reason why that's important is that that site has a complete kind of online version of many of the things that we're going to talk about this week. DesignKit is IDEO's gift, I suppose, to the world about the mindsets, the methods, and even some cases. See if I can pull up. Yes. So I should say as well, you can see on this site, you could go and do a free course on design thinking in 2 hours or 3 hours. You don't need to come to this to do that. I say this to my students when they come in class. I said, if you're coming here to learn how to sort of step through the process and use some methods, you can do that on your own. You don't need a semester-long course. The reason we do this course, or the reason I teach in Australia, is that that's not enough. That's not enough to work in the real world. That will teach you a few basic methods and a little bit about the language, but too many people go away from the workshop and think they're an expert. Then they go out and they find, oh, we need a viable business model. Oh, we've got to spend a few months in a place to really understand what's going on. So it's not good enough. DesignKit, which is here, and you can get the free that PDF there, that field guide that you just saw flicking past. So if you go to the site, put in your email, you get to download the manual, which I think I listed, I think, on the Google Drive. Yeah. So, so in a sense, the DesignKit site is the guide in a web form. And they break it up into three kind of elements. You have what they call mindsets. And there's a bunch of really good, these are worth just listening to. A bunch of clips here, David Kelly, Mr. Donaldson, Tim Brown, talking about aspects of this process. Okay, so really good just to flick through a couple of those and listen to them. They talk about mindsets. So mindset is really attitude. You've got to have the right attitude to do this. You've got to be optimistic, meaning we identify problems, we realize the challenge that is sometimes really wicked with governments and all sorts of things, but we believe intrinsically that we can make progress. That's optimistic. It's an optimistic innovation process here. We believe we can come up with something that makes the world better. That's optimistic. So it's about an attitude. It's not about just having a certain science or a particular set of math skills. So that attitude is important. So there's mindset, there's methods we talk about. And we talk about those three spaces, there they are: inspiration, ideation, implementation, and circle. And if you click on any of those on the design kit site, it filters those out into the ones that are relevant. If you do a rollover, you'll see there's a brief explanation of what they are. And these are so my students in semester, they will use 18 to 20 of these different methods in getting a solution. And they take you through that process. We have conversation starters, we have group interviews, we have expert interviews. So some of these will be familiar to you, but some perhaps not. Collage, okay? Case in point, when you get onto this topic about health, you start talking to some people. Of course, you could sit and ask them interview questions. But the other way you could get your information is to say, I want you to take 10 pictures with your phone of 10 activities or 10 objects that make you think about or make you feel healthy. But rather than sitting and doing an interview, I'm asking you to collect some images that are meaningful to you. Right? So that's a collage. And then you show me, as a result, your collage, which is basically a set of visual images. We've got peers observing peers. Go hang out with one of your friends as he or she goes to find lunch, or goes to the gym or some other thing. Hang out for a couple of hours and see, particularly if that's the group you're looking at, how do they do a healthy lifestyle or not? Track. So, what does that look like? So that's not an interview. Yeah, that's active field work. Build a team. We talked about that this morning. Define your audience. You can't design for everybody, but you've got to design for a specific group. Otherwise, it's too fuzzy. So who is that? Immersion is another one, which is, I have a course I teach called Design Ethnography, and one of the things that the students have to do, which is somewhat similar to this, is if they're going to design, if they've found a problem in an education space, a classroom, or on campus, or in some business, they have to go and work in the business. They have to pretend to be a cook for a day. They have to pretend to be a teacher for a day. Okay. They have to. I'll just carry on, or
yeah, it will be back in a while. So
yeah, I'll carry on. John?
Okay.
I mean, yeah. So immersion is, going into that. Or do you want to stop because it won't record?
Yeah. So I think we're not being able to broadcast.
No, we are being able to broadcast, but it's very dark. So,
Okay.
and the mic is working.
Yeah.
But
so it'll carry on recording.
it will carry, but it's very dark. So is that okay?
And check. Let's wait for a couple of minutes.
Okay. Why don't you ask me some questions while we're waiting? Okay, I've got another topic for you then. Healthy lifestyles is what we're going to look at, right? Promoting healthy lifestyles. So, what are the barriers for you personally at the moment to living a healthy lifestyle? What stands in your way? What are the barriers? Sorry? What do you mean?
Sometimes I just skip breakfast. Sometimes I just skip lunch.
Okay. So time management, sort of related to work and
Hostel life. Hostel life. Because hostel life, if our peers are not, if someone are indulged in gaming, we are also this game.
Yeah.
For example,
Like PC gaming is a
PC gaming is a addictive like PC gaming,
Oh.
mobile gaming.
Yep.
In the hostels,
Yeah.
everyone is group and they'll play.
So I insist that you use the microphone for the sake of recording.
In the hostel life, the people usually do gaming. They will group and they will game in the mobiles and PCs. It is so much addicted that even in the late nights they will play.
Yeah.
Somewhat like in the leisure times, they will always see movies or somewhat. In this time, they will use the part of entertainment is very more, and the concept for health is decreasing. There is, for example, if you want to continue that, there is no more peace for that. Our friends are not even that much interested. Due to lack of that, we are neglecting. Maximum people might be
like exercise and
what will do exercising, even you internet.
Okay, all right.
That's the main barrier we got here. The food, it will sometimes, what type of food normal in India, in any hostels, what they'll get is, they'll get very lean or they'll get very fat.
Okay.
That's the only thing here.
Yeah.
And that's the barrier we're making because we are lacking of proteins, deficiency. The food is good, but certain types of what necessary for us is not available perfectly. That's what I'm doing.
Okay.
Maybe not just gaming, but like binge watching TV series or binge watching movies is a very serious issue in hostels because like you have classes till 5 or something. After that you are free. So instead of going out for outdoor activities, you just sit up in front of a PC. We got fair enough net speed, online telecast it or get it from GitHub somewhere, download it, watch it for the whole night.
Okay.
So it's a very big barrier.
Yeah.
Maybe producers should start making more TV series.
Okay. Yep.
Maybe Netflix should go out of business. I was
Okay. We will look. So we will talk tomorrow. That's a good start. Then. What I want you to do before tomorrow is, if you can talk to 5 people. That's the ideal. Talk to 5 people about what are the barriers to a healthy lifestyle. And when I say that, what that means is most people, you included and me, know what we would like. That sort of balance of exercise and eating and a balanced lifestyle where we look good, and we feel good. So most of us know what we would like. So what's standing in the way of that? That's what you want to know. Now you've mentioned some things, but I think let me give you a first task, which we'll pick up tomorrow, to talk to 5 people between now and then to find out what are the barriers in the way of having that lifestyle that you want to have. That will get us kind of going. And then tomorrow we can maybe focus on sort of visual aspects of that. What does that look like? Okay, so look, go have a look at Design Kit. Go to the site. It's really the book, the PDF download. This is really the on site. It's got, as I say, mindsets, methods. The other thing that's great here, and one that students use, is case study section. What this is great for is there are a bunch of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cases of the use of design thinking to create solutions, services, and products, and a mix through this process that really solves some serious problems. In most cases, though not all, they also created financially sustainable enterprises. So doing good and and making money can go together. Not all of them, but yeah. So these cases are great. You can have a look at those. There's one here on financial literacy, for example. It's a scalable water and hygiene business. There's a really affordable, appropriate technology, combating jaundice for kids. They made a really cheap baby, I've forgotten what the name is. Yeah, that's it. And then community-owned health, agriculture, and water business. Look, we all know there are tons of these great initiatives out there. But the nice thing about this is that it's kind of all together, and it particularly shows how well design thinking works. If you click on any of these within the site, what you get is background, the process, and a particular focus on some method that really worked well. So these are all successful enterprises that solved the social problem using design thinking. So a great resource for thinking about these things. Where am I? Oh, yeah, thank you. So that's the website, Mindset Methods and Cases. That's the field guide which you know about, which you should have picked up, PDF. And that, notice that that's called the Field Guide to Human-Centered Design, not the Field Guide to Design Thinking. It's an interesting one. I'll tell you honestly that what happened, one of the things that happened with the term design thinking, title for our course, problem was that there was a very, I would say, cheap version of it that got sold in business schools and sold around the world. And so design thinking as a term kind of lost a little bit of its shine. And so there are a number of us, including myself, who tend to prefer to use the term human-centered design. See, if you think about it, design thinking, it's the popular term, it's the one that's out there. But the term itself makes you think about cognition. Design thinking, not design doing, design thinking. So it makes you think of a sort of a cognitive process, a mental process. Human-centered design is a synonym really for the practice, puts humans up front. By the way, human-centered is not the same as user-centered. I'll tell you that now. User-centered is a very common and popular term in the sort of interaction design space, as you probably know, and even in standard industrial design. But the difference with human-centered and user-centered is that a user is an individual. And I design something for a user, and I do user testing. I put the product in his or her hands, I show him or her the website, that's the user, and I design and I change for that individual as my target user. When I do human-centered design, I design for the community. The stakeholders are a broader set. It's not just the user. If I'm designing something for a patient clinic, I have to talk to the doctor and the nurse and the other people assisting. They all form part of the human-centeredness of this problem. And so the scope of who we talk to in design thinking is bigger than just the user. So don't confuse that. Some people do. The same with the guys at IATM, the same with my students in Swinburne, and the same with you. Unless you have a viable business model, you will be one of the 95% or 90% of enterprises that fail within 5 years. Very common. If your business model if your business model is not worked out, then you will eventually fail. typically you vote. The canvas, the business model canvas, which we will use, asks you to think about 9 dimensions of your enterprise. Whether this is for-profit or not-for-profit, doesn't matter. There are 9 things you have to think about, and your whole business model fits on one page. You should be able to talk about it, present it, pitch it to people, to funders on one page. We talk about, I'm not going to, I promise. We talk about first dimension, key partners. Okay? Key partners. Who are the people that you need to make your business work? Who are the key partners? Is it government? Is it local government? Is it certain associations, certain groups? Partners are not users. We talk about the key activities. What are you doing? By the way, the business model canvas is now an essential part of the human-centered design manual kit. We talk about the key resources. Okay? What resources do you need to make your business work? What matters here? What's the value proposition? That's right in the center there. Your value proposition drives everything. This is why you're doing it. This is the change that you have identified that you want to happen. That's the value proposition. Everything hinges on that. If you don't have that clear, then you don't have anything. The rest falls apart. It all hangs on the value proposition. What's the change you're trying to create? Customer relationships. We'll talk about this, in detail later. We have, wait a minute, my eyes are not working so well. We've got the channels. We have the channels through which we connect to customers, the way we channel. This could be social media, this could be different kinds of channels. We have the customer segments up there at the top right, and then down below we've got the standard cost structure and the revenue structures. So we can outline this, we can draft this. This is also a design problem. Your business model is a design problem. It's not an economics type accounting thing. That's a budget. Budget is separate. This is a business model canvas. This is a design challenge. And when you fill this out for your idea, it becomes the start of another conversation. It becomes something that you put on the table to your partners, to your stakeholders, and you talk about, does this work? Will this work? What do I need to tweak? It's another design element. So, business model, really important. This is what I was talking to you about. So Tim Brown from IDEO was talking about earlier on. So I said back in 2009, it was all about customers. It was all about the market. He's shifted on and thinks about other things at this point. Let me see if I can get him to work. Not that one either. No, I'll tell you what, I've got the wrong link, so I'm not going to play it for you. But basically, basically what Tim Brown says here, a little later in the story, 2013 or so, is that initially he was thinking about design thinking for a competitive business opportunity. And if you know anything, or if you go and check out where IDEO is playing now, IDEO almost exclusively these days is in the social innovation space, not business. They've moved. They're into large projects across Southeast Asia, in the US, in health, in literacy, in all of these different spaces. Why? Because it's much more exciting and it's much more meaningful the outcomes have a big impact. And IDEO has shifted from this exclusive product focus to social innovation of various kinds. And they're collaborating with all sorts of people. So it's more than business. Now, the case, and this is one that I know a little bit about, not deeply personally, but this case, which there's a paper by Kumar and Mahalingam and some other people. So Ashwin Mahalingam from civil engineering from IIT was involved. And Ashwin is a friend, and they were looking at the redevelopment of the slum in Srirangapatna in South India. They used the design thinking process for this urban redesign. They came up with some great solutions being funded by IFMR, non-banking finance corporation, to bring this to realization. And I want you during the week to have a look at that. Down at the bottom there is the link to the blog, which runs over a few pages. That blog really talks about the process that they went through, the consultation that they did as they tried to discover what was needed. It's a great story, and the paper that goes with it is a good one as well. So, there, as I said to you, on the what do you call it? On the design kit site, there's those little cases, of application, and they're great. But this particular one is one that I know some detail about, and was also inspired in part by some work I did with Ashwin. I want us to look at that this week and discuss it also later on. Now, there was a great in the Economic Times just recently. So, Economic Times of India, a great article, 14, I think. I have the link somewhere. And now we're getting on to why it's necessary to do more than just go to a workshop for 2 hours to understand how to use these different tools. Why is that not enough? And human-centric design thinking, is the title, is the new buzzword. Now, when people say buzzword, it's often a sneaking criticism. It means this is the term that people use, but it's a little bit hollow. It's very market. Now, I thought this was a great comment from the Economic Times, which is up there on the board. It's time for business, governments, and others to develop in developing emerging economies to broaden the methodology box for developing high-impact solutions that can scale. That's saying that the current portfolio ways of doing innovation is not achieving the inclusive India that we all want. The job, they say, is not done by applying design thinking as a linear blueprint process and a by-the-book methodology. That's what you learn in one of those 2 and 3 hour workshops. That's not enough. You need a solution, development solution that truly makes sense of the embeddedness of economic action, social context, structures, and methods, also class and power relations, institutions, and to culture. So, the failure of design thinking processes and design processes, and often in sustainability, this is the case in point, is trying to bring some package model of change from the US into Nepal or Colombia or Sudan into a particular context, and thinking that just because you know what the methods are, that it will happen. If you don't understand the other structures of power and difference and the institutions there, then you will fail. It's a great book actually by Duncan Green, who heads Oxfam strategy, and he's an economist. How Change Happens. Great book. Talks about all of the key elements and the ways in which local politics and power are really important. It's true everywhere. So it's not so. This is a warning to thinking that solutions come easy. So for you and for tomorrow, and as we move forward during this week, and you do some thinking tonight, talking about. We have a focus this week on design thinking, yes, but a focus on social innovation through design thinking. Because that's where the interesting work is being done. That's where the challenges are. And I would say, at least in Australia and the US and the UK to some extent, places that I work, in fact, all innovation is social. All innovation must have a social angle. The idea that it doesn't leads to a naive, stripped down version of innovation, which ends up meaning I make a new app, or I make a new website, or I make a new product. That product technological focus is not good enough. We want to engage through the process. With the process through the workshop, we've identified this theme about healthy living. Oh. It's quick. So we've identified this theme of healthy living. You're going to ask questions of your friends, colleagues. Think about it yourself. And connect that. And tomorrow I'll give you some deadlines and ideas. Did anybody talk to you about anyway, give me some questions and I'll just pull up this. If you have some questions, please ask now. I'm just going to show you, but I need your where's it here? Okay. So there is a free. I set this up. If you go to Canvas in Structure and you sign up, it's free. I set up everything here. This is a platform that we use in Australia for different things. Yeah. So either I have your email or something similar. Or I send you the link, because this is a public course. There, I've set up, so here, overview, objectives, details, a bunch of readings. Some of them you've seen, some of them you haven't, they're all here. The tools and manuals are here. Usually it's PDFs. The lectures are here. Media links here. And then there's a number of other sort of elements which will come up. Case study, the Sri Lanka case study, for example. If you hit on that, everything's working. I'll take you to that. Here's the IFMR website, for example. I've put in here pretty much everything. Today's lecture is here somewhere. Yeah, lecture 1. And everything else is as well. So there's a bunch of stuff in here. It's pretty much a semester's work. It's all there. There's that article, example, I just cited. So there's the Economic Times article. There's more about that. So you can join up to that. Probably join up, I think, if you Probably back here something. Yeah, there's a. Here we go. All you would need is to have a register with Canvas with free course or something. And if you know this link, then you can sign up. That's my gift to you. Leave you with a year's worth of work. Okay. Is that all good?
Yeah.
Yep.
So in the customer relationships, channels, and segments, the business.
Yep. Yep.
In the business model canvas, that customer relationships, segments, and channels. Are there any specific examples as to how is relationship different from the channels and segments?
Yeah. Let me see if I can. Okay, this is a good one.
An organization's business model can be described with 9 basic building blocks: your customer segments, your value proposition for each segment, the channels to reach customers, customer relationships you establish, the revenue streams you generate, the key resources and key activities you require to create value, the key partners, and the cost structure of the business model. But it's not sufficient to just enumerate the 9 building blocks. What you really want to do is to map them out on a pre-structured canvas. This is what we call the business model canvas, a tool that helps you map, discuss, design, and invent new business models. Let's briefly go through the 9 building blocks, starting with the customer segments. These are all the people or organizations for which you're creating value. This includes simple users and paying customers. For each segment, you have a specific value proposition. These are the bundles of products and services that create value for your customers. Channels describe through which touchpoints you're interacting with customers and delivering value. Customer relationships outline the type of relationship you're establishing with your customers. The revenue streams make clear how and through which pricing mechanisms your business model is capturing value. Then you need to describe the infrastructure to create, deliver, and capture value. The key resources show which assets are indispensable in your business model. The key activities show which things you really need to be able to perform well. The key partners show who can help you leverage your business model, since you won't own all key resources yourself, nor will you perform all key activities. Then once you understand your business model's infrastructure, you'll also have an idea of its cost structure. So with the business model canvas, you can map out your entire business model in one image. This works for startup entrepreneurs just as well as for the most senior executives.
Didn't quite answer your question, but here's the, we'll talk a little bit in detail about that tomorrow, but if you go and have a look at, I put a version in here somewhere in the site. It's that one. Yeah. So, look, if you go looking for that, looks like this one is in the Wikipedia version, but there's probably some others. And you see that thing down there with Strategizer. If you look for that as well as this, what will help is, hang on, see if I can try to zoom this. What happens is under each of those 9 dimensions, so usually, I tell you how we do it in class. I get people to print out, or if this is a business, they will have a version of this on like A1, like that size. And they will have a room where they're working on different projects. And this will be up on the wall. And they will start filling it in with basic drafting of ideas in the different areas. They'll be changing that over time, modifying it, but everybody gets to see it. It's clear to everybody. So the business model canvas becomes a talking point. And if you have a look here, so what's helpful about when you go and look at the actual printout, under key partners, you've got who are our key partners, key suppliers, which key resources are we acquiring, which key activities do we perform. These sub-questions link this dimension with the others. Okay. And you've got motivations here for partnerships. I always try to explain, to students that a partner is an organization that you need to make your enterprise happen, but they are not a beneficiary, they're not a customer. They're an essential partner because they bring resources or, they supply you with something. Without them, it's just not going to happen. So it's important to identify who they are or who they will be.
That means they are all the.
They are all the stakeholders except the customer.
Pretty much. All the stakeholders except the customer. Yes, although in the yes, more or less in the design thinking process, when we talk about stakeholders, we identify users as the primary stakeholders. Primary. We then identify a second level of stakeholder who are, okay, I'll give you an example. If I'm designing an innovation for patients in a hospital, the patient is the primary stakeholder. Doctors and nurses and the people who immediately care for that person are the second level of stakeholders. They have to be considered in terms of the innovation that we're putting together. Then there's a third level of stakeholder in that setting who are outside of that. We might be the hospital administrator or something, that third level. They don't, so there's the patient, that's our primary focus, but we have people here who care for that patient and who are really, they exchange information about that patient, they record, so they're essential. And then we have a third level just outside that. So it's just when you use the word stakeholder and you talk about, users. So we tend to distinguish those, in the design process. So in some senses, yes. But a partner could be a local government, it could be a firm, a supply in the supply chain. So yeah.
No, but then what about a company like Facebook?
Yeah.
Where the users are the partners. I mean, they generate the maximum value for the company. In fact, the company does not produce anything. It's the users who produce the content. So in fact, the users are creating the value of which the company is profiting. So then, when we are talking about businesses like that, then I think we need to rethink the business model canvas also.
Yeah, and that's right. So that's a really good example because it shows how, as you say, you've got customers in a sense being key partners, and we also know at the moment that the trade-off for that, in terms of privacy and other things, is not as transparent as it should be. This, how can I put it? the business model canvas kind of assumes honesty at a certain level, or it should. But yeah, because there's a clear value proposition. The initial value proposition for Facebook was, people wanting to connect to each other and all the benefits of that. At what cost?
No, but my question was slightly different. When you're talking about customers, when you're talking about partners and we are segregating partners and customers,
then like you will have a challenge when you come across a company like Facebook or any, for that matter, an e-commerce company, or for that matter, any other social media user. So then,
I suppose one way around it, or one way of answering it, is that possibly Facebook would say that there would be a bunch of suppliers of something who are key partners for them who are not users. So I'm just imagining Facebook, okay, as an enterprise. They have a platform, they have a whole bunch of, I suppose, resources that they need for things to happen, whether it's the back end or anything else. Whether that's vertically and horizontally integrated by them alone is another question. But they have a bunch of support systems that are required for them to operate, irrespective of people feeding in content. And so, in this particular instance, you might do an analysis where the key partners were all those support systems. But yeah, it's never going to be, work perfectly. But customer relationships is a key, in that environment. So yeah, it's a good one though. It's a good question. Yeah. There's also so we use the business model canvas when I'm working with social enterprise. Of course, this changes somewhat, because over in the customer segments, you have customers and beneficiaries. They're not always the same. I'm a social enterprise. I sell something. I employ artisans to make something. They benefit. They're not customers. And so when I draw up my business model, which tends to be a social business model, I have to distinguish customer and beneficiary. They can be the same, but often they aren't. My value proposition is different. Also the question of revenue streams and cost structures is different in terms of details. So the model, this works reasonably well for a small to medium enterprise startup type of a conventional business. When you do the same thing for a social enterprise, you have to introduce a few elements and categories. Because the value proposition, the impact that you're trying to create, and those things change. So the devil is in the detail. Yeah.
As every one of us, both of them asked the question that in certain cases the particular canvas doesn't work. And I also looked up on the web. It's like this is just one of the forms of canvas. There are like lot of different forms of canvas. So maybe there's a different canvas with different words. Like on here I have opened something. It doesn't have a column called key partners. Instead, it has something called decision support.
All right.
So like maybe canvas is just the dividing something into 9 parts, and those 9 parts can be changed based on the internship we are enterprise we are working with.
Yeah.
Because in some cases there is no key partner. Maybe there is no activity being done. But value proposition is always there maybe.
Yeah.
So maybe that keeps on changing.
Yeah. I think that's right. So there is some variation. I think though, and talk about that a little bit. It's a little bit like with some of those terms, though, decision support, for example, language matters. I think it's telling a different story. It's like design thinking versus human-centered design. The language you use to describe the categories of your business model also says something about the way you think about the world. So to me, when you say there's a model out there, I haven't seen that one, decision support. That sounds, and it's not key partners, for example. That kind of puts the emphasis somewhere else. Yeah. So that's worth. But yeah, there are a few kinds of versions out there. But the 9 kind of elements is a good kind of concise way of saying you have to have thought about these things. So I always ask students, and when I've worked with, I did some work, there's a group called the School for Social Entrepreneurs. They're now based in India as well, in Delhi. So they're a global group, and they help, what would you call them? They're like a social enterprise education unit. And I worked with them for a year as a business mentor for an NGO in Australia who was trying to move from being an NGO, non-profit, to a social enterprise. And so they had certain activities and doing, but they weren't generating any income. It wasn't sustainable. They were getting money from the government to run programs for poor people. And so I tried to work with them. I worked with them for a year to try and shift their model from not-for-profit to a sustainable social enterprise. They didn't manage it. Couldn't do it. That's a mindset thing. But they understood the issue. But shifting from receiving money to making money, being sustainable, is hard for some organizations. So yes, learn from failure. So, does that sound like fun? Yeah. So indeed, there are a few versions out there, and some examples of these things filled in. So that's quite useful as well. People who've done sort of business model canvases on Uber. I'll tell you what I do. So my students, I'm bringing 10 students to Tamil Nadu for a couple of weeks in December. So they'll spend 2 weeks at the Centre for Social Innovation and Entrepreneurship at IITM looking at social enterprise. How do you design that? What are the challenges? And one of the things that they will be doing, they look at that in relation to sustainable development issues and sustainability. One of the things they have to do is they have to analyse cases. They have to analyse social enterprises or small to medium enterprises using the business model canvas. So it's an analytical tool, meaning I can take that, I can look at an organization that is running some enterprise, and I can say, okay, what's the business model? Because use it as an analysis tool. Can I map that out? How does that? It's a good exercise. So they do that. So it's analytical, and it's also a practical business tool. So it's got those two functions. So yeah, so that is that. So you know what you got to do? Sorry?
Talk to people.
Talk to 5 people. Yeah. Healthy lifestyles. What gets in the way? I'll tell you one last thing. Let's see if I can find this. Yeah, okay. So, one of the things that we recently did, and I've got a Springer book coming out next year, which is about application of design thinking in higher education in a range of different disciplines, in health and medicine and so on and so forth. But we wrote a chapter in an innovation book. This is one of the things I've recently done with some people, and we looked at 5, 6 cases, different cases of application, and we were looking at the challenges. And one of the things that we said in this particular article was that the key benefit or the key focus of design thinking compared to other approaches is its focus on the problem-finding stage. So the problem-finding process, notice that we talk about problem-finding. To get into that space of that inspiration space is a finding process. It's spending enough time understanding who or what we're dealing with, and that phase is the key. And we were looking across Australia, and one of our conclusions in this particular chapter was Australian education is risk averse, meaning that there was a fear among students and universities, not so much schools, but at the other level, to give students open problems that might fail, that might challenge. That was a problem in the culture of education. Not so in the best schools in the US, and not so in others, not everywhere, but in some of the best places around the globe. The fear of failure is a big barrier to using design thinking in higher education. And I think it could possibly be a problem here as well. Certainly is in Australia. And also in Australia, most of the design thinking courses are running out of management schools and business schools, not design schools. Management and business who pick this up, not design schools. And then a few other schools, health, public health, schools like that. So, all right. Anything else? Yeah. Good luck. Okay. So, yeah. So, have a look at some of those resources. Think about that healthy lifestyle. Okay. What we're going to do at soon, very soon, is I'm going to walk you through those 3 spaces of innovation: inspiration, ideation, implementation. Look at taking that problem, looking at the methods that go with each of those. You work in a team, you talk to people, you apply some methods, you figure out an insight into what's going on there, to develop an idea that could be developed into an enterprise that will resolve for some group of people this issue of healthy lifestyles. So that's your aim. That's going to be your aim. And then spending enough time coming up with some ideas and visualizing those, and maybe testing them with people. You can test them in the group, you can test them outside, you can float them on Facebook. That's what my students do sometimes. We put the idea up in a basic form and see how people react to that. tested. All right. Okay. Great. Have a good night. Thank you.